So, the Hive Lord's finally here. That's scary. There's also a giant dragonfly that breathes fire. We've got a lot to get into today. So let's get right into that. So, Helldivers 2 just came out with a new update called Into the Unjust, and it is absolutely insane from just a gameplay perspective. But this is Nate's Games box. We talk about lore here, and from a lore perspective, it's also insane. And while we will get to the rupture variants of the bugs and stuff later, I want to start out with the biggest thing in this update, the Hive Lord. The Hive Lord has been added to the game. And if you're unfamiliar with the Hive Lord, in Helldivers 1, there was a kind of boss battle style event you would fight on the harder difficulty missions called the Hive Lord, which is, what we've got here. This Hive Lord was meant for a team to take down and even had a massive health bar on the top that signified how difficult it was. And that Hive Lord in Helldivers 1 was the absolute king of the bugs. This thing here was the hardest thing to defeat when you're fighting the bugs in the first game. And now, as I may have predicted, I'll toot my own horn a little bit, that we are eventually going to get boss battles in Helldivers 2. We have the Hive Lord in Helldivers 2. This is likely the biggest bug we will face in the game. And it kind of raises some questions. Why is the Hive Lord just showing up now? Well, for that, we're going to do a quick flashback onto how the bugs from the first game in Helldivers 1 became the Terminids in Helldivers 2. I've covered this in previous Terminids lore videos, so I'll keep it quick here. The bugs in Helldivers 1, once they were eventually defeated, were captured by humanity and used to be squeezed for Element 710. And as they were squeezing them for Element 710, they were like, hey, what if we mutated these bugs with all sorts of wild chemicals, radiation, so we could get more Element 710 out of them? And as this often goes with wild experimentation, it went horribly for humanity. The bugs got stronger, they got out of control, broke out, made the Terminids. Boom, here we are today. That raises the question here. There was the Hive Lord in Helldivers 1. Why is the Hive Lord just showing up now in Helldivers 2? Why wasn't it there from the beginning? Now, I don't think all the Hive Lords were wiped out after the First Galactic War, hence why we have them today. A lot of them were wiped out, and you even saw in Helldivers 2, since the game started, there was Hive Lord skeletons sitting around everywhere. So, there's evidence that they were killed off. But, not all of them. I think that as humanity was expanding around the galaxy and moving on to formerly bug-infested planets, the Hive Lords stayed burrowed so deep they couldn't be detected. Humanity wiped out all the surface bugs, and even some of the, slightly subterranean bugs in caves and whatnot, like the new caves that just got added to the game that we'll be talking about later. But the Hive Lords, they were so deep, humanity just couldn't do anything about them, didn't know they were there. And now, finally, which I think the Terminids have a greater hive mind that's controlling all of them, the hive mind decided now is the moment to strike. Now is the time to wake up the Hive Lords on all these planets that humanity inhabits. So you're telling me there's a Hive Lord under my house this whole time? Yes, Grandpa Democracy, there was probably a Hive Lord under your house this whole time. Oh my god, I can't believe this. Billy, get the cannon, we got a Hive Lord to take care of. Wait, Grandpa Democracy, before you go, can you say the line? Fine, whatever, I have a few seconds here. Subscribe to Nate's Games box and help him talk to himself in an old man voice in front of his computer. Well, that was very on point and slightly hurtful, but alright, we're gonna get back to the video with the Dragonroach. So, the Dragonroach is more or less just a dragon from Skyrim. I mean, even the way it flies in is exactly the same. Swoops around and just, whoa, it's here. There's the dragon from Skyrim. This is a dragon. Dragonroach. Anyways, back to the point. If we're comparing it to a Helldivers enemy, really the Dragonroach here is pretty similar to the Stingray of the Illuminate. It flies around the battlefield, does strafing runs of giant magic energy that destroys Helldivers, so pretty similar to the Stingray in that sense. But the devs have called the Dragonroach a flying bile titan. And that really is true, because the Dragonroach is a lot tougher than the Stingray. Stingray, hit it with one good missile shot, it's down. Dragonroach, no, that thing's tanking missiles. But again, this raises the question of, where have the Dragonroaches been? Why have they not been terrorizing us since the beginning? Why were they not in the First Galactic War in Helldivers 1? Well, I have a couple different answers to all the questions I just asked myself here. Why were they not in Helldivers 1? I'm going to put that at purely software limitation, because that game was a top-down shooter and things flying around from above just would not work well. But, as to where exactly did these Dragonroaches come from, well, it is tempting to say they must have come from the Shriekers in some sense. Well, the appearance is there, and the fact that they fly is very similar. I think they are much more closely related to the Bile Titans, because A, heavily armored like Bile Titans are, and B, shoot acid just like Bile Titans do. But how exactly did a Bile Titan get wings? Well, I mentioned earlier that a lot of the mutations we see in the Terminids today came from humanity experimenting on the bugs from the First Galactic War and creating monstrosities. But this is not the first time, even remotely, that we're seeing mutations happen that happen completely out of humanity's hands here. the predator strain of bugs. Popped out of the gloom, boom, new bugs, we didn't do anything about that. So I think here, the Dragonroaches are actually the result of a Bile Titan and a Shrieker sitting far too close together in the gloom, and the gloom just smashing them into one horrific creature called Bile Titan with wings. Now, I think that's enough about the Dragonroach here, because we don't know all that much yet. Probably get into it more in the future as we learn more. But I want to talk about something else here that I kind of poo-pooed at the beginning. There is 3 other new variants of Terminids we've seen before that have some very interesting features to them. They are called the Rupture variants. You've got a Rupture Spewer, you've got a Rupture Warrior, and you've got a Rupture Charger. Now, all of these Rupture variants of the Terminids do one similar thing, and that is called Burrow. All of them will burrow around the battlefield in some sense to come and attack you in new and sneaky ways. Let's start with just the Rupture Warrior here because it is the most simple. The Rupture Warrior acts exactly like a normal warrior, comes up and wants to stab you with its big claws. But how does it do it? It doesn't just walk towards you like the rest of the warriors. This thing burrows under the ground, kind of snakes towards you, and pops up out of nowhere, which makes it a little more difficult to fight because you may not see them coming as they're burrowing along, because they do make a little waves on the top of the ground, but it's not all that apparent, and in the heat of battle, you may entirely miss them. And the next new variant we have here is the Rupture Spewer, which, much like the normal Bile Spewer, will stay further back from the battlefield and arc bile bombs right at you to hit you with their very, very not tasty acid. But how they vary from their original ones is that they burrow, not at you exactly, they launch a few bile bombs at you, and then burrow away to new locations so you can't hit them as easily, making them much more difficult to deal with than the original Bile Spewers, because the original Bile Spewers, big, round, and slow. These guys, big, round, and not slow, because they can burrow underground and just burrow away. And now finally for the scariest of the new Rupture enemies, the Rupture Charger. Because if it wasn't bad enough to have a gigantic armored bug running at you trying to headbutt you, now you've got a gigantic armored bug burrowing underground at you at alarming speeds to throw you into the air to kill you. I tell ya, not great. But what exactly do all these burrowing enemies mean for the lore of the Terminids here? Well, they fit in with the new caves that were released, which don't worry, we're going to get to at the end here. And I think these burrowing enemies have always been around the galaxy, but we just haven't encountered them because we were not going to Terminid home planets trying to destroy them at their source. Like, these burrowing enemies don't serve much purpose if they're on a normal planet where you've only got tiny little bug holes and stuff. They would burrow around, like, find food, I guess, or something. They wouldn't be doing much. Whereas these burrowing enemies on the new cave planets with the mega hives, oh, these burrowing enemies are the ones that dig out those mega hives. And, yeah, I mean, maybe a few of these burrowing enemies are present on other planets too, to dig out the small bug holes. But, you know, they're insignificant, you didn't run into them often enough, or they all moved on and died out after the planet was invaded, something like that. But we're running into them now because we found these caves with mega hives, and they're still around digging out these giant mega hives. And with those mega hives, let's finally talk about the new caves they added to the game, because they are very interesting and affect gameplay quite a bit actually here. But first, I want to talk about what's in these caves, because this unlocks a very interesting part of the lore that I've always kind of wondered about here. The Gloom. Where did it come from? How did it get here? Gloom-eyed Joe, something like that, whatever. The Gloom has been invading the galaxy, and no one really knew where it came from until now. The Gloom is coming from these mega hives deep in the caves from what they call the spore lungs. These spore lungs are shooting spores far out into the galaxy, and they're kind of like the spore spewers on the surface that affect just small areas on a planet, except they are just propelling them deep into deep space because it's a massive spore spewer called the spore lung. But I mentioned that these caves create a brand new challenge for gameplay. And they do, in fact, because when you go into a mission, you'll know you'll be going into caves. You can come prepared, bring the correct stratagems and whatnot. You can bring super destroyer weapons that will not go into the cave because you're underground. That's right. None of your stratagems will get through into the cave. Not even your resupplies you call in because you're underground. The hell pods can't punch through into this cave here. The only way to get stratagems in and resupplies is to find openings in the cave where you can actually call stuff down. So you got to bring in everything you need beforehand and hope you can make it to the next opening to get a resupply, because this isn't like a normal mission where you can call stuff down wherever you want. Here, you're actually limited when you can call things down. This obviously is a very fun new gameplay mechanic to kind of spice things up and make things more interesting, but from the lore, it's also very interesting for the Helldivers, because this means Helldivers have never had to fight underground before. This is not something they're used to, which, to be fair, how often do you expect to fight in a massive cave system? Probably never. So they don't have the technology for this. They can't bring all their useful tech underground, like big space lasers to knock out bugs and stuff. You got to deal with everything with what you bring with here. So, we don't know everything about the new update yet and all the fancy little details, but I wanted to give you my quick take on the lore and how it affects our existing understanding of the Terminids. So, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd love if you leave a like down below, consider subscribing to the channel, and leave some comments on what you feel about this new update and how you think this affects the Terminids and what we may see in the future. Thank you, see you next time, and goodbye.